This is Tiffany Rosier, the host of the Afros and Knives podcast. We use the Anchor podcasting app to create and distribute the show. Creating a podcast on Anchor is effortless. It allows you to record a high-quality podcast and distribute it everywhere, including Google Podcast and Apple Podcast. They distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard everywhere. You can easily make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. No fancy equipment or podcasting experience is necessary, and it's 100% free. As long as you have a story to tell, Anchor is the platform to use. Share your story through audio using the Anchor app for Android, iPhone, or your desktop. Download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today.
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Afros and Knives podcast. I am your host, Tiffany Rosier. This week, we introduce the Fresh Voices series. These are conversations with women who are in the early stages of their life in food, wine, or hospitality. I wanted to hear about their experiences, get their perspectives, and increase their visibility. Today's Fresh Voice is a recent culinary school graduate named Nina Broadie.
Thank you again for being here tonight, Nina. And we just want to hear a little bit about your background in whether it be in food or your transition into food and just where you are right now in your career and just a little bit about you.
So I'm Nina Broadie. I'm 31 years old, originally from Los Angeles. I say LA born, South Carolina bred. I graduated high school in South Carolina, and that's where my maternal family is from. My father and his family are from Alabama, so I have strong Southern roots. But after graduating high school, I went to college for 1 year, and then I joined the Air Force. And I served in the Air Force for 10 years between Texas and Maryland. And while living in the Air Force is really where I started to cook, mainly just from being away from home. My mother cooked, my grandmother cooked, my aunt cooked. So I love food. I love home cooked food. And I still wanted that after I had left home. And I spent a lot of Sundays on the phone between my mother and my grandmother. What do I put in this? How do I cook that? And feeding my friends and other people in the dorms, and then they're your maid family. And that's where really my love for cooking and being in the kitchen came from. So after I separated from the Air Force, I got a job in IT project management at a finance analytics company in New York City. So I moved from Maryland to New York. I live in Brooklyn now. And I've been here for 2 years. So after 1 year of working in IT, I love the project management side. I love the talking with people and the planning and figuring out what needs to be done and how it needs to be done. I was missing something. I wasn't fulfilled from that. And I talked with and toyed with going to culinary school for a few years. I almost started while I was in Maryland, but my work schedule changed and I wasn't able to attend the program that I had been kind of researching. And so I decided then, I was like, you know what? I'm here in New York. I don't know how long I'm going to be here. There's a great culinary space, obviously. And why not, basically? And two, I think my other pressure maybe was that I was turning 30. And I guess it's kind of this feeling that's for sure, I'm gonna. If I keep living, I'm gonna get older. And so if I don't do it now, then when will I do it? Why would I wait to do it later if I can do it now? And so, was July of 2018, I called up to ICC, International Culinary Center. It used to be called the French Culinary Institute, and I did a tour. And I'm pretty sure I signed up that same day, and I only had a couple of days before I was going on a trip that I'd already planned, and I would be starting school right after I got back. So it happened pretty quickly, and it was a part-time program, Monday, Wednesdays, and Friday evenings. So I went to work, 8 o'clock in the morning, got off work around 4:30, started class at 5:45, and was released from class at 10:45. So I did that for 6 months. And then the last 3 months of the program is an externship, which I'm so grateful, and it was honestly a privilege. I completed at Henry at Life Hotel under Chef J.J. Johnson, Chef Sam Davis, and Chef Omar Tate, which was an amazing experience. And that so far has been my culinary journey. I just graduated, and right now I'm still working my 9 to 5. I'm in IT project management, but I am searching for my next role in the culinary field.
So talk to me about your experience because I was 30 when I decided to go ahead and jump into culinary myself, or technically I was 29 going on 30 when I decided to make a career change and shift into culinary myself. I had been working in marketing and decided I did not want to do that anymore. I was done working in an office. And so my journey is very similar. I had been cooking a lot on and off when I was living in Nashville, and decided that I just needed to kind of seek it out a little bit and play it out a little bit. And so I came back to Arizona and went to Le Cordon Bleu. So for you, getting into culinary school, what was it that, outside of like, okay, if I don't do it now, it's not going to happen. Where do you believe that confidence came from to go, you know what, let's just get serious about this. Stop, you treat it like a hobby, and just decide to like jump into kind of the professional space and, get yourself educated and start to look for work in the field?
So when I started culinary school, or when I was thinking about going to culinary school, my thought process was I'm going to become a chef, and then I'll work in the kitchen, and then one day I'll open a restaurant. So I've wanted to open a restaurant longer than I've wanted to be a chef. And then the cooking came later. But actually, my motive, I won't say my motive, well, I guess it was kind of my motivation to go to culinary. My cousin and I made a pact. She works in a career in the industry she's not necessarily happy with, and she was thinking about attending this school programming for graphic design, which is the complete shift. She's a nurse now, so it's a complete shift. So I was like, well, you'll go to graphic design school, and I'm going to go to culinary school. My mother was upset. I didn't even tell my father because I was in the college program for marketing, which is ironic, but I was in a program for marketing. I was going to take a break. I took a break from that and was going to go to culinary school. And she didn't even do it. I did it. I went to culinary school, and then and then in the last thing, she was like, I just don't know if this is good for me. I was like, what? but I had already committed.
What kind of restaurant did you want to open?
All by myself, but yeah, so I guess that was what made me leave. That made me take the lead, was that we made the path. But I don't know. Yeah, I haven't like, I don't need to be copyrighted or anything. But my grandmother, her name is Hazel. My mother's mother, her name is Hazel. And so I've always wanted to open a restaurant called Hazel. And it would be Southern. It wouldn't be too elevated. I wanted to be home cooking. I wanted to feel comfortable, but I wanted to be like a nice setting, live music. That's kind of like my vision for it. But I haven't like made like a business plan or anything. But yeah, ever since I was like 10, I told her, I said, grandmother, I had never been to New York. So I was like, oh, those northern people, they don't know anything about Southern food. I'm going to open the first like Southern restaurant in New York City. That's what I thought I was going to do. And I was like, I'm going to name it after you. Now that I'm up here, I was like, there's Southern food, there's Caribbean food, there's all the food here.
And since the restaurant idea came to you before the desire to become a chef came to you, what role did you see yourself playing? If you weren't going to be the chef in that kitchen, were you just going to open it and be kind of the face of the restaurant, or did you see yourself being a host or a bartender? Like, so what did you imagine your role to be in the restaurant?
I definitely imagined it to be like the face. And probably like, I guess like a operations general manager role. Definitely not like like an angel investor, like, just an investor, silent investor.
Right.
No, I wanted to be active, and it was going to be my restaurant. It was going to be my grandmother's restaurant, her recipes, her influence. But I didn't think that I would be the one cooking.
Oh, okay. Okay. Did you know who you wanted to have cooking, or it was kind of part of it just that kind of folded into the idea a little bit, and you weren't even airing out that detail yet. It was like, well, somebody's going to do it, but I don't know who. Did you have like a chef in mind that you were following, or that you loved, or that your grandmother loved?
I did not. No, I did not. Actually, I don't even really like know chefs. I'm kind of embarrassed to say it a little bit. But I don't.
Well, I mean, it hasn't been very long since you kind of took the leap, so I could understand that. Like some people kind of it becomes an insatiable appetite to follow the personalities in
Mhm.
cooking, and then other people are just kind of look for their own voice. And so the other stuff will usually come. Like you will find chefs that you love and admire, and as you eat more and get out into restaurants and other places more, that you'll find people that you have a passion for and their culinary voice and their culinary position. So that stuff will definitely come. I mean, I think you're almost at an advantage though, because you don't have anyone influencing your own point of view at this point. And what tends to happen is you'll have, especially younger chefs, jump into the industry, and they've been following someone for a long time, and they love this person, and they love their work and their attitude, and they'll get into cooking because of that person, and that person kind of colors all of their choices and the things that they do, and which is not a terrible thing. But when the time comes and they want to break out and do something original, they have a hard time stepping out from under the shadow of this person they've admired so much. So you actually have a pretty cool advantage getting into opening a restaurant for yourself, because you do have like a kind of a clean slate. You don't have anyone that you're following, anyone that you're looking at. And so you can really kind of find yourself, or find your way to your own culinary point of view pretty simply.
That's very true, and that's exactly how I feel. I mean, sometimes when I'm in rooms with other people, and especially in culinary school, and my instructors or other students are naming chefs, and I'm like, who is that? Um, and then they said, that's the person that there's a pioneer of. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's cool. But
Yeah,
I feel like it also puts me in a position where I'm just like, I'm trying to learn from everyone. When I was at my externship,
right.
The front of the house people were teaching me things about cooking. The dishwashers and everybody is teaching me something about the kitchen, about restaurants, because I honestly, like, I don't know anything. So, yeah, it's been a fun experience so far, and I've learned so much just from, especially on Instagram. You follow one chef, and then they tag somebody else, and it's such a small network. Everybody knows everybody, and it's honestly amazing.
It's a great sense of community among cooks. And while there are definitely some behavioral challenges that we share, and some uh, I guess some social issues that we are definitely faced with currently, in how we treat minorities, how we treat women, just a number of other conversations around that. For the most part, we have a really tight knit community, and everyone's usually fairly generous and open. It's not as competitive as it used to be, because people just want the industry as a whole to do well. They want people to look up to the entire industry, and not just a single person or a single chef or a single restaurant. And so, yeah, so there's definitely been some major leaps and improvements. But as you can tell from even just the nature of this podcast, that, there's just so much more work yet to be done to make sure that new voices like yourself coming into the industry can find, their part in their space in the community. pretty simply and pretty easily, so you can get the support you need, because definitely opening a restaurant requires a tremendous amount of support
Mhm.
and people cheering you on, because it is not an easy line of work, but it's extremely satisfying, and people get into it and they just keep doing it. I always tell people it takes a certain level of madness in order to get into this profession and really love it the way most people love it. So but yeah, I mean, I love when I was like 10, I used to think about being on PBS and having my own cooking show like Julia Child or Jacques Pepin. Yeah, that was my thing. I used to, like, when I would play outside, that was where my head went. And it's funny because when I stepped away from it and started pursuing other interests, I completely forgot about those moments that I had connected to cooking as a child. And so every now and again, I'll have a conversation or an experience will come up and I'll remember doing that stuff.
Mhm.
So yeah, those dreams kind of seated in childhood will definitely chase you until you see some of them fulfilled. So now, did your grandmother have a specialty that that everybody always expected her to bring to, like, a family cookout or to a family holiday, or what was the thing that you really loved the most that your grandmother used to make?
The thing that so my grandmother's specialty was everything.
Yeah, isn't it?
If you
That's what grandmoms do.
she was in charge of everything, and she was like, I guess like the kitchen manager at our church. So any type of
Oh, okay.
fellowship event or anything like that, she planned who was bringing what, and there were certain dishes that she wanted to make herself, um, and it's at her house. Yeah, my grandmother, she cooked everything.
Mm.
My favorite thing from her, my favorite meal, I'll say, was fried chicken, butter beans over rice with homemade biscuits. That was like my
Mm.
number one request whenever I was coming home. And she'd always ask, what do you want to eat? And she'll have the meal ready for you when you get there, or on its way at least. But she's going to make what it is that you asked, and that's the thing that I would always ask for. But I honestly loved everything. And her sweet tea, she could walk me through making the sweet tea, and it still won't taste like the way. I was like, are you sure this is the pot that you use? Is this the right pot? It doesn't taste the same. She's like, well, did you let it sit?
It's
And
true.
yes.
It is so true. You like, okay, this does not taste right. It does not have the same anointing. It don't have the same spirit in it. I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but it does not have that grandma energy on
Right.
it. So,
Other
okay.
people come in and they're like, who made this sweet tea? Because this ain't Hazel's tea. And I'm like, I made it.
This is not
It's
hers.
not.
You're like, oh, Lord. Okay, I'm gonna try again. It's so funny. And I remember asking my mom, there was a couple of things she used to make, and I felt the same way. I'm like, she used to do this baked chicken. And when people were like, so she roasted it? No, it was baked. I mean, no, it was baked, y'all. It was not roasted. And she doesn't make it anymore, but like to try, I've been chasing it since I was a kid. And I'm like, how did she do this? And so she explained it one day, and I was like, okay, there's a number of things missing here that I'm like, I did all the proper steps, but like she said, at one point I was like, Mom, it's still not the same. And she's like, well, food is so different now. The way it's grown, the way it's sourced, the way it's treated, and just, the quantity of it even has diluted the flavors and the taste. And so I think a lot of us chasing the flavors of our ancestors and of our like grandparents and our parents, it's going to be a little more challenging to find that flavor profile, to find that magic again, because even the way, like I said, even the way we farm and the way we treat animals and the way we treat food in this country and in our culture is so vastly different than the way our grandparents and our parents came up.
Yeah.
And so, it's definitely presented us with a challenge of trying to re-engage those flavors that we all have in our memory, because it's just the product's not available, and it's just like, man, that chicken is not raised the same. It doesn't have the same flavors naturally that they used to have. And I mean, it was just the simplest little baked chicken drumstick. And girl, bye. It was like, nobody cares that we can't find these flavors anymore. So we out here salting it and buttering it up and putting pepper on it and putting paprika on it and everything else. and we can't find our way back to that moment because it's just all the components are so different than the times that our parents and our grandparents were raising us. And so did she happen to leave any of has she given you some more recipes, like outside of the sweet tea? Has she passed down that biscuit recipe or that fried chicken?
So the way that so my social media handle is Ain't No Recipe Baby, because that is Hazel's favorite phrase. The only thing that I know that she has recipes for, I don't know. I haven't gone through like her recipe book. She has them. But cakes, my grandmother baked a lot too. And so like cakes and pies and stuff like that, she always had recipes. And what's the Southern home cooking? And she would get them from magazines and stuff like that. But as far as everything else, he'd be like, well, especially the biscuits. We've argued about the biscuits. What's the recipe, Grandma? And she was like, well, you put some flour and you put some of these, put this. And I'm like, but how much? I gotta know how much. And she was like, I don't know, Dad. I just pour it until it looks right. I just put some of it. And that's the type of stuff she would say. So she was like, you have to be in the kitchen with me. I recorded her one time making the biscuits. Because my mother was in California. She was like, did you record it, Nina? Did you record it? I was like, I got it. I have it. And I cannot find that tape for anything. I can't find it.
See, well, she went in there and erased it. She knew. She was like, this girl ain't gonna ever get this recipe. It's all right.
Probably.
But it's funny. It's so funny how they're like, well, you just do it. You can just tell. And you're like, and as you cook more, you do understand exactly what they're saying. You kind of go, there was a time I was working outside of Anacortes in Washington on one of the islands, and I would come into the kitchen and I'd have I had my staff there, and most of them were pretty young and they had never worked in a kitchen before, or they had very little experience. And I would come in and I would, everything would be going, and I could smell that no one had added salt to anything.
Wow.
And it would freak everybody out every single time. And I'd come in, I'd be like, was anybody planning on seasoning any food today? And they're just like, huh? I was like, salt, y'all, you need some salt in this. And they were like, but I thought we did. I was like, no, you can smell it. There's no salt in anything. And so they were like, how did you know that? And so I would grab spoons and make everybody taste it. Mm-hmm. And like every time they would be like, this doesn't taste, this is bland. I'm like, yeah, there's no salt in anything, friends. You got to add some seasoning. And so I think after a while, you do kind of develop a second instinct for when something is right, mm-hmm. And that's why I was like, you always used to tell them, like, cooking is a very spiritual act because you have all five senses involved, but you also have that third eye happening when you cook, where you just go, that's ready. Oh, that's right. And you might not, no one else might smell it. No one else hears it, but like your spidey senses start tingling and when it's right. And so, yeah, your grandmother's probably like, girl, I don't know what to tell you. You will do it enough times until you can feel it in your fingers. Like, okay, that's correct. Because bread making is very much, feel. And you have some really scientific things happening there, but there's a point where your hands are in the dough and you're kneading everything, and then all of a sudden your gut goes, okay, you're good, you're done. You can tell it's kind of turned the corner. And that just happens with like years of experience or repetitive action, doing it over and over and over again. And I think that's what culinary school, you'll notice, is made up a lot of repetition, and you're trying to get some muscle memory and just kind of this sense of, okay, that's when it's right, which is why they have you just do the one thing over and over and over again. And so there's this kind of repetition, and that you just don't find in other industries, and which is unfortunate, because I think there's some industries that could use the repetition, where people could practice a little bit more, and they would know their skills a bit better. But yeah, grandma was like, look, girl, you just gotta get in there and make the biscuits. Like, I don't know what you're talking to me about it for, but you get in there and get you some flour. But again, the flour is not the same. You have to play with the butter a little bit. Like, I used to have to make homemade butter so I could actually get buttermilk, because I couldn't find really good buttermilk anymore, and the flavor is completely different. And so there's just so many things that you will have to probably adjust, because you're like, your grandmother had these tools at her fingertips that we just don't currently have. And hopefully they are on their way back, because we have so many people who are committed to farming again, that we might be able to see some of these products come back into the market. But yeah, girl, you got to just get out there and put your hands in these biscuits until you find the magic, until you find that sauce. Because grandmama's like, look, I can't help you past this point. I showed you the gate. You got to walk through it yourself. But
baby.
no, and I love that sentiment because it speaks a lot to life as well. There's no recipe for life, and there's no recipe for these biscuits. You just have to you have to live it, and you got to experience it in order to know what she's talking about. So, but but I love grandmoms for that reason. I had a roommate one time, and I told her, I'm like, I love everybody's grandmom, like they're my grandmom. So just don't be messed up if I'm around your grandmom and I treat her like my grandmom, because they, grandmoms have this wisdom. I don't know if like God gives them this special like ticket, or there's this he sends them a handbook at a certain age and they go, okay, you're a grandmom now, this is the information you need to have, because they do have a really unique spirit about them that nobody else has in the world, and a grandmom when you see one. So yeah, but I love that. I love the fact that there's just something that, that is in front of you that will keep you passionate and keep you curious, because you'll always be chasing down this biscuit recipe. I promise. You will always chase it down. And it's just like, and once you get it right, it'll be funny how like the universe goes, well, here's your restaurant. Now that you finally got this biscuit recipe done, we will, it'll find a place for you to showcase it and to share it.
Every day.
Look, sometimes, you know what though? Sometimes it takes a show in the universe that you're really serious about something, and that's what you have to do. You're like, you know what? I'm gonna commit to making these biscuits every single day for the next 6 weeks, and it's amazing the doors that open because your energy is so different about what you want. It's like, all right, I am serious about these biscuits because it's something I want to put on the menu. It's something I want other people to share and have. And so you just commit to like getting into this practice of making these biscuits until you get them to a place that would do your grandmother proud, because you're like, you know what? I ain't got time to play at this point. Like you said, I have, if I'm not going to do it now, when am I going to do it?
Right.
And the world needs culinary voices like yourself, and, ones that have a heritage that they want to share and history they want to share. And I think so much of Black cooking is historical, and we carry kind of the soul of the people who came before us with us. And it's, I can't say it's really super unique to us, but it is such a huge part of how we cook that I just haven't seen, happen before. Like there's a lot of history with food, and you get a lot of like culinary history, and this is where this came from, and these are the 5 mother sauces from here, and this is what you do over there, and these are all the knife techniques people have been using for hundreds of years. But when people talk about soul food and cooking with soul, I think that's essentially what they mean, is that as Black folks, we cook with the spirit of all the people who have ever fed us coming through. And so that just doesn't happen all the time, because you can go into some really amazing restaurants with absolutely divine food, and yet you will always know the difference between that and soul food, because it's not so much that it's, hotter or spicier or greasier or anything, or saltier even. It's the fact that you can taste someone's personal history. You can taste their family history in the food. And there's a very personal part of it there. So I saw on your LinkedIn, I want to say, that you did some volunteer work with the James Beard House. So how did you find your way there? And what did you take away from those experiences?
So International Culinary Center, ICC, they really encourage you to volunteer at different events. So they have kind of a relationship with James Beard House, where you can volunteer there for all the different like fundraiser dinner events they have. You can volunteer beside the schoolhouse for the recreational or amateur classes that they have, and there's various other volunteer opportunities in the city. So I didn't even know about the James Beard House until I started culinary school, like everything else. But once I found out about it and just did some reading on the website, I was like, oh, wow, this is really amazing. And then just looking at the events, and the more that I'm finding out about success, I was like, oh, you go to this, I've never worked in a kitchen before. And I was like, so I should probably try to get some kitchen experience outside of my home and the classroom. So that's how that's why I went to the James Beard House. And my very first dinner was the most amazing experience. Even to this day, mean, it's only been a few months, but I worked, volunteered at the Carla Hall dinner at the James Beard House, and it was right after her book was published. And I wish I would have written the other chefs' names down, because all the chefs, I walked in and I was so nervous. I'm like, I'm hearing all these horror stories. Like, when I say I had no idea about the culinary industry, I didn't know that, like, there was like a thing where like chefs yell at people in the kitchen, and I didn't know that was I guess like the culture. And
yes, we're an unfortunate part of the culture.
I had no idea.
It's not so much as it used to be, but because people have learned that that's not how you treat people and that's not how you keep staff. Mm-hmm. But it definitely, there's a handful of chefs still out there trying to hold on to it.
I haven't experienced anybody yelling at me, but I have peeped a few egos. But at this point, I hadn't experienced it at all. I'd only heard about it. So then I'm like, well, I don't do I go and do I speak to her? As soon as I walked in, she was standing right there. And I'm like, I don't know if I go talk to her. I don't know who to talk to. So I introduced myself to one of the James Beard Foundation employees. Who was, I guess I'm like kitchen manager, I'm pretty sure was his title. And so he was like, oh, okay, just go introduce yourself to the chef. Sign in and go introduce yourself to the chef. Then I kind of like went and was kind of standing off to the side and just like picked a random person that looked like, they may be open to me talking to them. And then I was like, oh, I'm here to volunteer. And he was like, oh, well, just go and introduce yourself. Oh, okay, well, glad to have you here. But just go introduce yourself to this Carla Hall over there. So I went and introduced myself, and I was like, hi, chef, I'm here to volunteer. And she's all like, she was like, oh, what's your name? And she stopped what she was doing, and she was saying it's so scary to me. And she stopped, and she looked me in my eye, and she was like, what's your name? And she was like, thank you so much for volunteering. And let me see what I can have you. Like, and just gave me a task, and it was like, it was kind of like, I guess a weight on my shoulders. I was being dramatic, but I was feeling like very nervous. But immediately she made me feel like so calm and confident, really. And that type of vibe was the vibe in the kitchen the whole night with all the chefs. I remember it was Cheryl Day. She has a bakery in Savannah, and she made the dessert that night. And I want to look their names up on Instagram because everybody was so awesome. There was a chef, John Hall. I believe he's in Alabama. He has a pizza restaurant or something down there. But it was just such a beautiful event, and everybody like just was helping each other out, and they see you working on a task, and they're giving you tips, and they're like, "Oh, did you see this? Did you know how we did this? And did you taste this?" And really, it was a lot of fun, and I was like, "Oh, this is what the culinary industry is going to be like." I made a good decision. I'm in the right place, and I was very excited after leaving there that night. So I don't even remember what your question was, honestly.
Oh, no, that was it. I just wanted to see how you ended up, volunteering for one of those events and, what you took away from it. And it's true, like at our very, very best, cooks in the community of cooks in this country are generous and gracious. And so it's rare. I've only maybe had one instance where I've had a chef throw something or, kind of lose their temper and not know how to manage how to pull that back to be more productive. But for the most part, all the chefs I've worked for have been extremely generous and always very kind and also very honest, like, to make sure that you have the career you want. You want a chef that's going to be kind, but also going to be honest, that they're going to push you to do your best. And, if you feel safe in an environment, like you're not going to be abused and no one's going to take advantage of you and they're not going to mistreat you, then you do offer up your best work because you can go, okay, this person cares about me, or at least while I'm here, they care about me and what happens, essentially to even their food and how I'm preparing it. And so, yeah, I've never heard anything but great things about Chef Carla, and people who have engaged with her always say she's very generous. I met her at a food and wine show or food and wine event in Nashville. had just bought her cookbook, and I just got in line to have her sign it. And she was, again, very generous and just, was really open to kind of share a little bit of herself. And of course, with a line like that, you can't have like an in-depth conversation, but when she's with you, she's with you. She's like fully engaged in the person standing there with her. And so that's definitely, I think, a testament to who she is as a person, but also who she wants to be for other cooks coming in. Because again, like being a woman of color in the kitchen is already hard enough. And, it's, being nervous was definitely a reasonable response to walking into that situation, and not having any prior experience. But there's definitely a history of us kind of just not, it's not even being mistreated, just not even really being there. Like like I told a friend of mine, Black women have long set the precedent for cooking in this country. I think I can honestly say that we are the creators and the incubators of the American cooking style. Most of the food that is grown here is because native peoples and African slaves cultivated the land, and we are the ones who fed everybody for the longest time, and our voices just don't seem to be present in the industry, even though we are kind of the foundation on which that industry is built. So, but yeah, I mean, it's, the James Beard House has always had a reputation for like education and cultivation, and current and recently in the last few years, better representation of all people. If you go back into its history and look at some of the James Beard Awards and some of the seasons of the James Beard Award, the the talent is very homogenous. It's not really diverse, and so they have gotten definitely a lot better, when it comes to representing all types of voices in the industry in the last few years, and more specifically, voices of color in the industry, whether it be cooks or writers or any of that.
That was just
So,
like the industry in general, right? It was mostly white males for chefs.
And exactly. And it's always tremendous to me that the fact that there are so many women peppered throughout culinary history, even before Escoffier, a lot of the group of chefs that he came up with, there was a woman in that group, and she dominated that group. And a lot of the techniques that he set forth in his book, and that the group of men that he worked with all, kind of used, she was a part of that group. She was part of those foundations, and she's just rarely talked about and rarely mentioned. And like I said, and even more so, women of color, we're mentioned even less. And so, the reason why people know how to cook braised greens, and they know how to use different parts of the animal, and they understand how to cultivate rice and eat rice in this country, is largely attributed to the Black women who came here involuntarily and enslaved. And so it's, like I said, the American cooking is kind of built with the hands and on the backs of Black women. And so the fact that we are just now, finding our way to being ever present again is fantastic. And so we need more new voices like yourself to come in and continue to add to those, that voice, and to put your own point of view out there with your food and with your personality and the things you care about. And so yeah, it's definitely important to kind of find yourself in all the spaces that you can at this point, especially early on, so you can start to really develop what the thing you want to say through your food.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah. Now, you said you were looking, were you looking for something specific right now, like a specific type of job? Were you looking for a specific restaurant or position? Like, where do you want to go next? And, because I know the ultimate goal is to open Hazel's in New York, which we just going to put it on out there.
No,
and we just going to keep saying it.
Not in New York. Anymore.
Oh, not New York. Okay.
When I was younger,
okay. Where do you?
When I was 10.
Okay. Right on.
No, not in New York.
So where would you open Hazel's now?
I've been staying in Charlotte for the last couple of years.
Well, Charlotte is on that come up right now too. So it would be a great place to do it.
Yes.
Do you have family in Charlotte, or?
Yeah, I have some family in Charlotte, but our hometown is only like an hour and a half away in South Carolina.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
And now, have you thought about like finding your way to Charlotte to cook in some restaurants there and just kind of get a lay of the land and understand the culture of cooking that's happening right now?
Girl, I thought about a lot of stuff. Every day I think about I thought about since we emailed 2 hours ago, I thought about 30 things. But that sounds like a good idea. I probably should go down there and get a lay of the land. I don't know. I don't know how. I don't know when. I can honestly say I do not know. I am in the very like infant stage. I am just trying to soak up everything. Even with you talking about kind of like this Black food movement, that is new to me because all I've known is Black food, you know. And then between like my travels and stuff, been my experience has kind of expanded from Southern food to include Caribbean food and African food. But really, like, that's all I know is Black food. So I wasn't even really kind of, I mean, I know that they're like, you know, fine dining and all that stuff like that, but I wasn't even kind of like exposed or, I don't want to say concerned, but that's really how I feel. Like I didn't even think about that space, you know, or that we weren't in it and that we weren't necessarily being like recognized or, and by we, I mean Black food, that it wasn't part of it, you know, because it just wasn't wasn't on my spectrum, I guess. So
okay.
all of this is new to me, but even coming in, I think without having known anything about the culinary industry, I already have seen so many amazing female chefs and chefs of color that I can't even. I can understand it, but I just don't have that experience. I guess I feel kind of like naive, maybe. I don't know how I feel really.
No, I mean, I wouldn't say you're naive at all. You sound like everybody does when they first start. And like I said, some people come to culinary, and again, just remember, like the bigger influences in culinary they tend to be white male. So the guys who get into culinary who are white and male tend to have more voices speaking to them. They're surrounded by themselves. They have all the books in the bookstore are about them. All the media coverage is primarily about them. So they come by it honestly. They really are like, okay, well, everybody looks like me in this industry. And for a Black woman, it's a bit more challenging because you don't have that representation. It's harder to picture yourself in the industry, so you don't. And it's been kind of an ongoing theme with each conversation I've had so far is that how do we create an industry where there's more representation so you do have that 10-year-old little Black girl who's able to look and go, wait, there's someone who looks like me working in this industry, and it won't take as long for the next one to go, yep, this is what I want to do with my life. I want to be a chef. I want to be a cook. I want to open a restaurant, because they see more and more and more faces that look like their own.
That could be
so like to get
yeah,
and it's like because if all you know is Black women cooking Black food and having Black eaters, then the impression you get is that Black food isn't global. And if you think about all the places that brown and Black faces exist, then Black food is global. But that's not how the picture is painted for us. And so the more like I said, you come by it honestly. It's not that it's not like you would have known any of all this stuff to begin with. It's just kind of like, well, no one's pushing that information in your direction. It's not like you would have had to done a tremendous amount of exploring and had an insane appetite for cooking in order to really go, okay, I'm going to find everything I can about the people who look like me doing this work. And it just doesn't exist really. It's hard to find, it's hard to track down. And so, your curiosity has to be the thing that leads you in that direction. And so it's hard in any industry, if you don't see yourself, to not pursue something, because it's like, well, that space isn't for me. And so, now that you're in it and you're starting to meet people and you're part of events and things like that, you're like, oh, okay, so there's a space for us here. that we're carving out. And now you're a part of that group of women who are carving this space out for the next generation of women. And so, like, as you definitely pursue some things, the same energy with which you pursue culinary school, even if you got to put it out there to your cousin again and tell her, like, look, you know, I need you to like hold up your end of the deal this time. So whatever it takes for you to kind of follow your gut and follow your passion. Like when people ask me what I've done, my response always is I follow the food. I chase the food. Because I've lived in a lot of zip codes, and each zip code has taught me something different about food and about the work I love to do. And so like, follow the food for yourself. And what is it in Charlotte that would allow a restaurant like Hazel's to fit so beautifully outside of its geographical location and outside of the cuisine? What's the energy of Charlotte? Like what's happening there now? Because while 20 years ago Hazel might have been an ideal fit, it might not be the same city that it used to be, and especially in the culinary spaces. So what does that look like for you right now? So definitely don't be afraid to like jump in there. I mean, I got my first job on the line through a Skype interview. And that was rare. And that was in New York. And I was just like, that was a rare thing to have happen. But I had to just like go with my instinct and follow it. And so, that door opened and I just walked through it. So when you find yourself in that space of, I don't know what I'm doing next, that's an okay space to be in. Don't be afraid of that space. A lot of people get nervous because we are raised and programmed to always have a plan. And because we have this expectation of planning, what happens is if something doesn't go to plan, then we spend a lot of time being disappointed and frustrated, and even sometimes feeling shame that our plan didn't play out the way we wanted it to. And so it's just like plans are great and they can lead us in a great direction, and they can definitely have their advantages, but there's certain times in life where it's like not having a plan can be just as advantageous. So right now you can ask a million questions and you have the space to go pursue the answers. So it's like, yeah, 30, like being 31 don't mean anything. It just means like I got a lot of years in the game to play at this point. And so you have, especially when you pass that 30 threshold, there's a certain type of maturity that comes on to your life that you can manage some things better, and you have more tools to manage disappointment better. You're a bit more agile of mind and you're a bit more flexible. So you can definitely take on other things that you might have not been able to handle a decade ago.
Yeah,
so you definitely, you
situations where it's like, it may be rough now, but I remember before in the past and it was rough and I got past that and I'll get past this too.
Exactly. And so that's the attitude you want to have, especially in this industry. But I say, girl, get to Charlotte. There's some really incredible things happening in Charlotte in food. And I mean, become a part of everything that you can, the same way you kind of got into the volunteering in the James Beard House. That's another way to do it. You can call a few restaurants and ask them if you can come in and stage for a week or two, just for them to get to know you and you get to know them and you understand, the kitchen. Because the more work you can do on the line under a really good chef that's, generous with their knowledge and their attitude, just the better cook you're going to become. And you get that much closer to, to Hazel's, quite frankly. And so then you'll know what to expect of your own crew when you have one.
Right.
So yeah, girl. So don't be shy. Like, if you got something in your heart to do and, like that final destination for Hazel's is Charlotte, then head out there. And I mean, there's definitely work to be done and people to know. And, who maybe, the audience of ladies who are listening to this podcast, ladies, if you are in Charlotte and that you can hook Nina up with some work and with some opportunities, please just find her on Instagram and give her a shout, because we definitely want to, build the community of Black women who work in food and build that community, so we have support for, like I said, the next young woman who's coming up, who's like, I want to work in Charlotte, and I want to work at Hazel's for Chef Nina, and so that we each one teach one, we passing it on, we're paying it forward, and so so I hope this podcast will hopefully reach somebody's ears, and you will get an opportunity knocking on your door. And so I just say, just make sure you're ready, girl.
Right. That's what, as you're saying it right now, I'm like, what am I doing? Somebody calls.
I know, like, somebody call me. Somebody gonna call me, and I'm gonna be like, I'm gonna need about 3 weeks to get my stuff packed. So yeah, I remember one time I had to pass up on the opportunity because I didn't have a passport, and I just, like, a few months after that, I was just like, what am I doing? How can I want these things for myself and not be ready? And so I immediately headed down to the passport office and put in my application. And I'm like, look, when the next one comes up, I will be ready to go. And what's hilarious is when I started the podcast and I was planning this first season, I opened the season with one of the chefs that have, just has always been someone I have looked up to. And I mean, we're probably closer to peers, but she's been in the spaces that I really want to be in. Like El Simone has just been in the spaces I've always wanted to work in.
Mm-hmm.
And then I looked at the last episode, and it was incredible because the last episode I had it on my list of dream interviews for some reason, and because it was, quite frankly, and it's a woman who's in Morocco. She's the only Black woman who owns a hotel, who owns and has designed and manages a hotel, and in Morocco, and in all of Morocco, which is incredible. And so I put it on my list of, one day I'm going to be able to go to Morocco and interview her and blah, blah, blah. And so I had already planned a trip to Morocco. It's a 14-day tasting trip, or a 14-day like food trip. And so, it starts in one city, and we have some time in the desert, and each city we get to eat and spend time with, like, local families, and eating in their homes and tasting the food.
You planned this?
And so no, it's a company called Intrepid Travel, and I decided, like, this year was the year I'm gonna go and do something crazy. And I mean, I guess not crazy, but do something just out of my box, out of my comfort zone. And so I found this trip in January, and this company, they offer $1 deposits from January to the end of February. So it's every year at the start of the new year, they offer people an opportunity to really start to travel a bit more. And so you put your deposit in for $1, and then you get, a certain amount of time to pay off the balance. And so I was like, all right, I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna do it this year.
Awesome.
And so I looked at the schedule for the podcast, and I'm like, well, I'm in Morocco at the time of the last podcast. What am I going to do? And so I reached out to this lovely woman at her hotel, and I hit her up through Instagram first. And she was like, we would love to interview with you. And I was just like floored, absolutely floored. And I just was so excited. I'm like, it was just incredible to think, like, to start this journey and to have that last interview be, in Morocco with this woman that I have admired from a distance, who is just doing this incredible thing. Like, the hotel's been featured on, in Architectural Digest magazine. I mean, it's just a stunning property. I actually have managed a couple hotels, so I understand her life a little bit. And so I'm able to, I asked if I could interview her and her chef, who is a Muslim woman who you just don't see get interviewed very frequently. You don't see Muslim women getting interviewed about running a kitchen, like, ever. And so, I'm able to interview the both of them. And so, like, to have that be the very last show, because I just kind of went with I followed my gut on that one. I was like, let me just reach out. All they can say is no. And, lo and behold, it's kind of like, okay, what a way to end this podcast, in a way that, I didn't even imagine it could end. And then jump into season 2. And so it just really inspired me to go, wait a minute, okay, just kind of be ready and follow your gut here and be prepared. And that's the advice I keep hearing over and over again from this group of women that have, offered some time to me, is that all of them have given kind of the same advice. They're like, be ready, be prepared, and go with your, and, find yourself, make sure you're always prepared for that opportunity to come knocking, because you just don't know when it will show up. And definitely don't, like I tell people, don't hide your light under a bushel, girl. Definitely, get out there, read as much as you possibly can, get your hands on books by, of course, Black chefs and non-Black chefs, and, like, travel as much as you can, eat as much as you can outside of your normal space. And definitely, when you come back to Hazel's and you start to build that restaurant, and you realize all the influences that you've taken on are going to somehow finding their way into the food as well. It'll be a really beautiful thing to watch. So like I said, anybody who is listening to this podcast and you are in Charlotte or adjacent to Charlotte or know somebody in Charlotte, Nina is definitely up for an opportunity, and, definitely get herself into the space and get her connected with some folks that will take care of her and teach her the things that she wants to know. So we will see how that transpires. And I will definitely check back in with you and keep the people updated about your life and about your career and where it's going. So thank you again for spending some time tonight. I know it was a little nerve-wracking because it's probably, it's a unique scenario, but I love to hear what New Voices have to say and how they're going to contribute to the industry in the future. We definitely need more Black women leading in the industry. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your life a little bit. Afros and Knives is the first original series released by Set the Table Media, a digital media company created for the African American tastemaker to share authentic culinary, travel, and lifestyle content. They will become the global leader in African American digital media, serving passionate subscribers around the world with content that inspires, informs, and entertains. They want to raise the visibility of African American storytellers and produce food, travel, and lifestyle narratives from innovative, unique, and diverse voices, and then deliver that original programming across multiple platforms. To learn more about Set the Table Media, you may visit the website at setthetablemedia.com or follow them on Instagram, or you can become a Set the Table Media insider and keep up with their progress and watch the story of this idea unfold. Get on the wait list and receive an early subscriber discount when you purchase the mobile and television apps. You can also think about becoming a patron and supporting this work with your dollars. You can go to patreon.com/setthetablemedia and consider becoming a monthly patron so that as these ideas like Afros and Knives podcast start to unfold, you have a direct influence on the conversations we have and the content we produce. And now back to the rest of the show.
Thank you for listening in on this week's conversation with emerging chef Nina Broadie. We're excited that you have joined our community of thoughtful, ambitious, and informed listeners. We love to hear the stories and experiences of inspiring and passionate people. You're invited to the episode after party. Click the link in the episode description to become a member of the Afros and Knives community powered by Mighty Networks, and let's keep the conversation going. Don't forget to subscribe to the Afros and Knives podcast on iTunes and unlock the newest episodes every Tuesday. Visit the website and become an insider to get exclusive access to new shows before they air. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Did you know we had a YouTube channel? Each episode is available on YouTube every Wednesday. Get your hands on the official Season 1 t-shirt in the Afros and Knives store. And don't forget, Afros and Knives is on Patreon. We are looking to grow the show from not just audio, but to video. Become a sponsor today and visit patreon.com/Afros and Knives. And we will talk to you again next week.